Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. After making that last podcast on areas of possible survival in the wake of a nuclear holocaust, and the fact that, contrary to what I originally thought, that it would be the third world that would have most survivors, not the first world. And then realizing that that was not true. In fact, after I made that podcast a couple of hours ago, I went and I started reading even more on the subject from other reputable sources. And the last one I read said that the two best countries to live after a nuclear attack would be Australia and New Zealand, both Anglophone first world countries. That is definitely not what I would have thought. Easter Island is also mentioned, of course, a very remote area in the world, as is Antarctica, which I mentioned the last time, a place that only has scientists working in research stations and a whole lot of penguins. So I started trying to rethink the subject from a different angle. It seems as though survivability may not be the issue. That's what I had focused on for much of the last, let's say, 2 weeks, about 2 weeks, that I've been thinking about this particular subject. But if survivability is not the main issue, then what is the main issue? And that's what I've been trying to come to terms with over the last couple of hours. So if I sound like these ideas are fresh, unprocessed, they are. I am literally still working them out, and I will likely continue working them out in the future. But I decided that I would go ahead and make another podcast giving you my preliminary thoughts in this area. And here they are. No, I don't think that survivability really matters. Not that much. Not that much. What matters is whether a society has the ability to sufficiently recover enough to rebuild something out of nothing. Because all countries, in the event of a nuclear holocaust, will suffer. Lives will be lost all over the world. There really is no area that would be even close to being 100% safe. That's a pipe dream. That's a simple pipe dream. Areas that, however remote, however developed, would both be susceptible to destruction. That seems to be the reality of it. And so, regardless of what happens, we're going to see a very different world than we see today. The world will literally look nothing like it does right now. And so I think the real question is, which countries will be the most prepared to build something new? Once the capitalist world system has shown its inability to meet the needs of our globe, and once the capitalist world system has had so many contradictions, imperialism primarily, but also racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, and so on, there will have to be a way to look at certain parts of the world that were not a part of the process leading to the nuclear holocaust, if and when that happens. Obviously, I have no way of knowing whether such a thing will happen. Just a regular guy, no way of knowing that. Wearing my Darwin cap now. But countries which have not been involved in building global capitalism, which basically have been the victims of global capitalism, which have been colonies in many cases of first world nations, which have been oppressed extraordinarily by the empire, the American empire. Those parts of the world, I think, will have the dialectical potential to build something new. So that is the way that I am looking at it right now. I'm going back to a theme that I have touched on many times before, which is dialectical and revolutionary potential. Once the world, or if the world, is devastated in some type of catastrophe, which, again, we have no way of knowing that, but that's why I say if that happens, what will become clear is that the first world, the empire, has failed. It has been totally unsuccessful in delivering on its promises. It will be the end of the first world. And I guess you could say it will be the end of the world dominated by the first world. Now, whether the first world can rebuild is an open question. I mean, I don't want to see anybody suffer, but by the same token, I don't want to see the first world rebuild and simply start going through the process of preparing for another nuclear holocaust or another war, world war, or something even more devastating, which perhaps we can't even imagine now with technologies that have not yet been discovered. But if that dialectical and revolutionary potential will exist in the hands of the third world, then despite whoever survives, even if Australia, New Zealand, and large parts of Canada survive, as many scientists predict, and I have no reason to question what they're saying. I also have no way to verify what they're saying, since that's outside my field as a sociologist. Then the only thing that really will matter, in my opinion, will be dialectical and revolutionary potential, which I think can be found in abundance in the third world, even now, but cannot be found in abundance in the first world. And even if parts of the first world survive, like Australia, New Zealand, and segments of Canada, it won't be the same. It won't be the same, especially not without the US, because the US will assuredly be devastated by such a nuclear apocalypse. So it simply won't be the same. You can't have NATO, for example, without the US. NATO is simply an extension of the American empire. It's an extension of the first world. It's the way in which the first world dominates the world and keeps the rest of the world in line. So NATO would not exist, at least not in its present day form. How can you have NATO without the US? So if the third world has the revolutionary potential, has the dialectical potential, after the first world has annihilated itself, as well as huge sections of the third world, then only, in my opinion, the parts of the third world which remain can build socialism and communism. That is a preliminary conclusion that I have come to over the last couple of hours. I was literally heartbroken, which may sound weird, that large parts of the first world will likely survive, especially considering that I live in the first world. In the US, most likely very few parts of the US will survive. I'm sure that some places will, at least according to what I read, but not many. The US would likely see its end. And the first world, as a dominating power over the world, will also, I think, come to its logical conclusion. So, what can we expect in the immediate future? I think we can expect to see a world that becomes increasingly more perverse, disorganized, and oppressive. I think we can expect this year, 2023, to perhaps be the worst year in, if not in world history, at least in American history so far. And I think if we make it past 2023, we can expect to see 2024 be even worse. Because then the election will be completed, say Trump is elected and he fulfills his campaign promises, in effect, to become a dictator, that would not be very much fun. I would not want to see Donald Trump as a dictator. Maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't. But by the same token, I do not want to see Joe Biden in that position either, given his unfailing support for the terrorist state of Israel in their campaign to destroy Gaza. So at that point, whoever is elected will, at least according to the US Constitution, be in their last term of office, meaning Trump has already been president for 4 years. By that time, so will Biden. Neither of them can legally be elected. Of course, there's a possibility, I suppose, that the Republican Party, if it can get itself together, might try to keep Trump in as a permanent dictator. I personally find that doubtful. I just don't think that will happen. If the Republican Party were more organized, if there was not this constant infighting between different tribes within the Republican Party, maybe, but still, they would face the opposition of Democratic attorneys in court. And I suspect that those Democratic attorneys would win. I would even guess that despite the fact that the Supreme Court SCOTUS is on the right for the most part, that even it would not support a dictatorship of Trump. So I think that worrying about that is a triviality. I am not concerned about Trump becoming a dictator. I am concerned about either Trump or Biden becoming a second term president. Why? Well, because second term presidents, in principle, have nothing to worry about. They're not thinking about their next campaign for president, because there will be no such campaign. That is their last term in office, at least according to the Constitution. So I think that either one of them will feel as though he has a relatively free hand to do precisely what he wants. That, I think, would be the danger. So right now, that, I guess, is my main concern. It's about the state of the US as the world's only supposed superpower, with the most gigantic military that has ever existed in human history, with wealth that is so exorbitant that it could not even have been conceived of only a couple of generations ago. And so a country like that, an American republic like that, would, I believe, pose a greater threat to the world even than that it poses right now. And it certainly poses one right now, with the support being given to Israel to wage its war on Gaza. So to recap, I've accepted the fact sort of, that if there is a nuclear holocaust, the third world will not have most of the survivors. Most of the survivors, or at least a plurality of the survivors, will most likely come from Australia and New Zealand, and then from Canada, not from the US, but still that's enough, potentially, to rebuild the first world. Maybe, but without the US, I am doubtful, especially considering that the US has insufficient dialectical potential to meet the needs of the present hour. Whereas I think the third world does have that potential. It has had that potential for a long time, but it has been held back from exercising or from fulfilling that potential due to the dominance of the empire. If there is no more empire, which is what I think will happen. Notice I said think, not predict. Then there is, I believe, a good chance, or at least a reasonable chance, that the third world might begin its quest for socialism and communism, and that the process leading to that may not be too far off. For the time being, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.